Hello everyone, my name is El Parnaso, and for today's video we're gonna talk about the Yummy Fiendsmith extra deck. So don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share the channel with your people so we can grow. The first card will be Fiendsmith's Desire. Why? Let's talk about it. Historically, there are some versions that have not played the Fiendsmith's Desire in the Yummy Fiendsmith, so that is why I wanted to start with it. However, because of how the format right now is rewarding removal, and because you need to justify a better utility card than the Fiendsmith Desire, and because how both of your main boss monsters in the extra deck, like SP Little Yummy and the High Caesar, are attribute lock after you use the Dominus Purge, one of the best hand traps that you can play right now. I think that Fiendsmith's Desire is a very hard debate to try to take it out. But I wanted to start with it regardless because at the end of the day, if you want to take something from the extra deck, most likely will be these two spaces. Now, taking the discussion away from Desire, something more debatable is Salamangreat Almirage. But in order to take out the Salamangreat Almirage, we need to start to think what I am putting instead of that Almirage. So a lot of people have asked me about the Mookcracker right here, especially now that we are in a very Falling on the Virtues format, right? Because yes, you can make the Caesar untargetable, but the Mookcracker kinda works the same in the sense that if a monster you control will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can tribute one Fiend monster instead. So whenever they try to make Falling on the Virtues, you can just tribute the Mookcracker and still protect the High Caesar, right? Now, there are other benefits for Mookcracker being in the Yummy Fiendsmith, so just for the purpose of the video, let's make some space here. Because if you play the Mookcracker, you can also take more advantage of this card, the Baphomet. Why? Because thanks to Mookcracker, you can justify now the level 6 Fiend monster that you are not getting with the Baphomet that you can get with Fiendsmith Lacrima. Because Mookcracker can also target one Fiend monster in the graveyard, discard a card, and if you do, special summon that monster. So thanks to that, you can try to take advantage whenever you know you go first to put, like, let's say that the Mookcracker is already in your extra deck, you know you're going first, you put the Baphomet, and then you can send these two different cards that are relevant in the format right now. You can send the End of Anubis, or you can send the how is this called, or the Invasion of Darkness. Oh, the something Darkness, I can remember well. Okay, this guy right here, the Invader of Darkness. Like, obviously this card should be an FTK against the Sky Striker decks, for example. The End of Anubis should be an OTK or a big advantage against decks like Branded. However, you always need to remember that Mookcracker, in order to make the special summon effect, you need to be locked for the rest of the turn in Fiend monsters. What does that mean? It means that if you are going for the Mookcracker line, you need to do this at the very end. And I mean literally at the very end. You can even make SP Little Yummy after you make the Mookcracker effect, right? So the problem with this is that if you can, for example, make SP Little Knight after the Mookcracker, you can banish, like, you need to make the banish effect to any of these two fiends that you are sending in order for the Baphomet to revive it in your opponent's turn before you are making the Mookcracker. Only this assumes that you are special summoning a bunch of monsters, and you can see how the wishful thinking is started to be there, right? Like, you are assuming that you are not going to get any kind of hand trap in order to be in a position when your combos allows you to have the privilege of having so many effect monsters on the board that you can make the SP Little Knight and the Mookcracker. Also, you need to consider how much advantage you are actually losing by discarding a card, because at the end of the day, you are already discarding a card with the Capsi Yamiway. Most of the time, you are going to discard the Marshmallow that you added, but still, right? It's still discarding a card. Also, another thing that you need to consider is that the Baphomet, if you are going for the High Caesar, the Baphomet is going to be attached to the High Caesar. And then you need that Baphomet in the graveyard in order to revive any of these two. So the first and biggest value that the Moonkraker will have is to protect your monsters from destruction. And most likely that effect is to protect specifically the High Caesar from falling on the Virtus. However, if you are subscribed to El Parnaso, you know that there is other combos with less wishful thinking that make the High Caesar untargetable. And by Caesar being untargetable, they can falling on the Virtus the card. So the first big plus that the card is giving you, if you are in the position when you ended up making it, is something that you can do with less effort and the same reward. And the second reward of summoning the Flute Gate is something that will happen after you use at least the effect of the Caesar, or you are not leaving the Caesar at all. So you can see how these different scenarios are starting to diminish the card. But let's say that everything went okay. Like you drew like 2 Yamis and Engraver, and your opponent didn't draw anything. Like they are not just hand trapping you. They didn't draw Fuwa, they didn't draw Ash, blah blah blah. Most likely in that scenario, yes, you can protect the Flute Gate that you are summoning with the Moonkraker Steel. Like for example, you can protect the end of Anubis against falling on the Virtus. And well, if you summon the Invader of Darkness, you are kind of fine. But at the end of the day, the most important Flute Gate that you will summon will be the end of Anubis. Because if you are in a position when you can special summon the Invader of Darkness against a deck like, for example, Sky Striker, you should be in a position to win already before the Invader of Darkness. So then you are just putting yourself in a position of win more, that, you know, is not ideal when it comes to prepare yourself to bigger tournaments. Also the spacing decided, right? So let's think right now just about the end of Anubis. Let's say that you special summon your end of Anubis. Yes, you can protect it from falling on the Virtus, but you can't be protected by Forbidden Droplet. You can't be protected against Super Polymerization, because now you have a lot of darks with different types. Because if you put yourself in a position when you banish the end of Anubis, it means that most likely you have an SP Little Knight on the board, which means that you have a warrior that is not a fiend. Therefore, you can just get Super Poly right there. Or you are putting yourself in a position when you are using the SP Little Knight as a material to make the Moonkraker, which makes that you are losing one of your main disruptions on your end board. Because right now the quality of SP Little Knight is very important, even against deck that you care to summon the end of Anubis. Like SP Little Knight exchange itself with the OG Falling of Albas against that matchup, which is very important. SP Little Knight is very valuable in general right now in the format. So you can see how the end of Anubis is, even in the IDSL scenario when no one hand trap you, is still kind of a win more position, even when taking consideration of the Moonkraker destruction protection, because people are playing Droplet and they are playing Super Polymerization. There are even some people starting to play Evenly Match, like not that much, but still. So the Moonkraker can do anything to plus you against those kind of cards. And if they didn't draw any of these kind of board breakers, most likely they will have hand traps. And the hand traps will avoid even more for you to be even in a position to make the Moonkraker anyways. And if they didn't draw hand traps nor board breakers and they just stuck with engine, most likely you will have won against that match, even without having to put yourself in this wishful thinking scenario, just with your Yamis interactions, with your SP and your Caesar untargetable. So you can see now how the Moonkraker is starting to have a lot of assumptions and a lot of problems when it comes to how you are actually winning Yu-Gi-Oh duels. Even though the Baphomet is an excellent card, like don't get me wrong, I love Baphomet. But at the end of the day, you can see these kind of problems with the card that even in the best position possible are kind of replaceable by making the Caesar just untargetable without having to expose yourself to super poly, blah blah blah. So this is my biggest issue with trying to play Mookcracker in Jammy Fiansmith. I still also need you to remind that losing one extra card is very tough in a deck that their biggest value is its consistency and taking the most advantage of each and every starter that you are putting in the deck. Because at that point, you most likely will be discarding a non-engine that can actually be useful because that is why you are putting them in your deck, right? So that is my issues with Mookcracker. There is another card that you can put here, which is the Typhoon. However, even though Typhoon is really good against, for example, Kultung matches, you are exposing yourself against the position whenever you draw the Dominus Purge, because Typhoon is very useful against Kultung if you can still use its effect, because that is the way you get rid of the Kultung RS. The Typhoon can just attack over it because it will have like 5,000 attack. The Typhoon can only attack over the Salem. But because of the nature of this specific deck, if they still have the Kultung RS, like you're still losing, right? Plus, even if you didn't make the Dominus Purge, because you are playing the Fiansmith cards and these different kind of board breakers like Droplet and Talents, you have a lot of different ways to interact against these Kultung RS. So I don't see how Typhoon will have more utility scenarios than the Almirage will have. Like, you need to respect Salamangreat Almirage, okay? Like, we are all going to be long dead, like actually dead, and people will still make decks in 2060 with Salamangreat Almirage. Like, this is one of the best utility cards ever. A lot of different decks have used this card from different years, over 7 years, I think. Yeah, over the 7 years that this card has been in the format. So in this case, I need you to think that this card is not is how to is very useful when you are going second to try to push boards to protect whatever you are going to special summon nets from any kind of pop, and is also a third link one in your extra deck that can help you in the grind game, because you are going. Yes, I know that you can say, hey, but Link Kuribo can still work in the graveyard, right? Well, it won't work in the graveyard if you were put in a position to make Dominus Purge from the hand. So there's going to be actually scenarios when you are going to top deck a Yami, but you need that Yami to become a Link 1, and you already made Dominus Purge, and you can just use the Link Kuribo in the graveyard, and the Snatchy is in the graveyard already. There can be also scenarios when you are going to draw a hand trap in the grind game as a top deck. You have the Mignon on the field, and because you don't have the Salamangreat Almirage, you can play and you will lose. There's a lot more scenarios when Almirage will be useful than the Mookcracker or the Typhoon. And as we established already, the Desire is not something that you kind of consider that much, especially in today's meta. However, you can make also the argument to try to do something crazy, like taking out these two, so you can have this crazy idea. The Ecclesia, and I don't remember how it's called, this other guy. And this one right here. Like, you can try this too, because if you do, you can put yourself in a position to put 3 Fallen and the Virtus on the deck, right? Like, that is an argument too. However, you are losing the value of the Desire, which again I think is very important for the deck, and you are losing the Desire, a searchable boss monster and a searchable utility card, in exchange for a card that there is absolutely no way that you can search with the development of your cards. So, like, this is still an option, but again, I think the consequences, especially for this deck and the reward, are not that helpful. Like, don't get me wrong, Fallen and the Virtues is an excellent card, one of the best supports that I have ever seen, but there are kind of specific problems when you try to add it to the Yami Fiensmith. It's possible, and maybe it is a good idea, but it's something that you need to take a lot into consideration, and that is why I'm just letting you know still that is an option that you can make, right? It's just the consequence is kind of tough. Now, that is why at the end of the day, the cards that I ended up putting in the best Yami Fiensmith extra deck in these two debatable spaces are the Desire and the Almirage. Now, this doesn't mean that you can put these other cards that I just showed you. It's just in a Yami deck. It's just that specifically in the Yami Fiensmith deck, you will have those kind of problems. So if you enjoy it, if you enjoy this insight, leave a like, leave a subscribe, share the channel with your people, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.